Thank you. Thank you so much and welcome, Wingate students. We have a treat for you this evening. We're having a conversation with Miss Dorothy Counts-Scoggins, who definitely has a story to tell. And we're just going to get right into it. Miss Dorothy Counts-Scoggins, thank you so much for saying yes to this conversation. So let's just start. Describe your neighborhood. Growing up before you went to Harding. Describe your neighborhood. How was it, and the school that you attended? Talk to us about that.
Well, my parents moved to Charlotte when I was 4 years old, and I lived on the campus of Johnson C. Smith University until age 15. It was, of course, Belleville Smallwood is considered a historic community because it surrounds the university. A university is over 155 years old. So the community that I lived in, there were residents from Johnson C. Smith that worked at the university in several capacities. There were professors, of course, people who worked in other kinds of roles at the university as well. But also in that community were other Black families who worked across Charlotte in many different roles. So it was what I have always said, it was a diverse community, but a diverse community socioeconomically. But we were a community. And of course, the schools in that community were Belleville Elementary School and West Charlotte High School. And so I started out at Belleville Elementary School in first grade and went through to sixth grade, and then went on to Northwest Middle School. And then, of course, I was assigned to go to West Charlotte. All of those schools were on the corridor. So you left one school and you go to the next school. So all of those schools were on the corridor. And back in those days, you know, it was walking, really not walking distance, but that's how we got to school.
Wow, walking. So you had those stories where you walked to school in the snow with 5 miles and things like that. That you tell stories like that.
So, exactly, but yes, not only that, Dedrick. While we were walking to school, there were school buses, but there were school buses not for us. So the school buses would pass by us going to the white schools, but we had to either walk to school or our parents would have to take us to school.
Wow, wow, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So can you describe attending a segregated school? I guess all your teachers were Black, and did you feel like you were getting inferior education because you were attending a segregated school? Talk to us about that.
Never. The teachers were very, that we had good teachers. They made sure that we got what we were supposed to have. The only thing that I would consider being inferior were, of course, the resources that we had versus the white schools in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. When I say that, the books that we received came from other schools, and in most cases, those books had poor or fair in them. We didn't get new books, but that didn't stop our teachers from making sure that we learned. And the other thing that all of our teachers were educated. A lot of them had advanced degrees. And even because when I went to Harding, I found out that some of those teachers only had 2-year degrees, but they were hired by the school system to teach in the white schools, but they required the Black teachers to have a 4-year degree or advanced degrees.
Wow.
So that's the difference.
Wow, wow. And in walking to school and seeing that, did you ever cross your mind? Did you ask mommy or daddy, why are the Black students going to this school? White students are going to that school, and the bus passing us by. Did that ever cross your mind, or did you ever question that?
Well, it not as much as my questioning that, but we were told that by my parents growing up. I mean, I understood segregation growing up. I knew I lived in a segregated world. I knew that there were differences being provided for whites as well as for blacks. I mean, I grew up in an era where I saw water fountains that said white and black. You know, I saw other things also as well. So I knew I lived in a segregated world. But that was something that we discussed, but it didn't. My father always said that morally, we deserve to have the same as they did. And we were citizens of this country. My father said we pay taxes. We should be able to receive the same type of services, education, and everything else that everyone else did.
Wow.
So I grew up knowing that.
Wow. That's good. That's good. So tell us what events led up to the decision to integrate the school district, and why did your father believe that it was important for you to participate in integration?
Well, of course, 1957 was 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education decision was made. Nothing had happened in the South. Nothing had happened in Charlotte. So if you remember, the late Kelly Alexander in Charlotte was president of the NAACP. And he brought together several Black leaders in our community and said, we need to test the system. And so what they did was they approached 20 families in Charlotte, my family being one of them, because my father was a part of that conversation with Kelly Alexander. And he asked if he would make application for his 3 children to attend predominantly white schools. I was going into the 10th grade. I had a brother that would be a senior in high school and a younger brother who was going into elementary school. So he did. Of those 20 families, the school board decided that they would only accept 5 families. And of those 5 families, we were one of the 5, but I was the only one in that family that was accepted to go to Harvard. And then, of course, it ended up being 4 students, 2 from one family, me from my family, and 1 other. So the 5th family decided not to proceed further with that. So that's how it all got started.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So tell me, how was the decision made to attend Harding High School? You said you were one of the ones that got accepted. What did they base that acceptance on? We'll answer that, then I'll ask another question.
Well, of course, I lived on the campus of Johnson C. Smith University.
Okay.
Harding High School was within walking distance of where I lived. It was actually about 2 or 3 blocks from Johnson C. Smith. I was assigned to go to West Charlotte, which was about a mile away. So Harding technically was the school in the community where I lived. It was a community high school. So that's why I was assigned to go to Harding.
Wow, gotcha. So can you describe the iconic image of you walking into the school surrounded by hecklers and things like that, that image that we see over and over again? Describe to me that, what was going through your mind and that iconic image.
Well, that morning when we got up, we, as we did every morning, and of course, you know, my father was not only a professor at the university, but he was also a Presbyterian minister. So it was in our family, every morning, we had breakfast together. And my father, of course, you know, we had prayer. And we began to talk about what that day possibly could look like. One of his colleagues came by, Dr. Tompkins, who is in that picture with me, came by and asked the question, do you need me to go with you? And my dad said to him, yes, I'm not sure what's going to happen once we get there. So that's the person. A lot of people think that's my dad, but that was Dr. Tompkins. When we got to the entrance of Harding on 5th Street, they had barricaded the entrance. And so he could not pull down into the circle to let me out in front of the school. He said to me, remember what you've been taught. Remember you're inferior to no one. Remember you can do anything you want to do and hold your head up high and be proud. Those were the final words that I heard when I got out of the car. And as I proceeded to walk 2 blocks to the entrance of the school, that's just when everything began to start happening. There was a woman that had formed a white citizens council here in Charlotte, and she was at Harding that morning. And she was the one telling the students what to do. And she said to them, don't let her get through the door. The more she said that, the more determined I was. I held my head up high, kept walking, and I felt that if I could get to the door, the kinds of things that were happening to me on the outside, that things would change. Finally, she said to the girls, spit on her, and they did. So by the time I got to the auditorium door to go inside, can you imagine, spit was dripping from the bottom of my dress. That dress was made by my grandmother. My grandmother had this thing. She was a seamstress. This is my father's mother. And she made me a new outfit to wear to school every day. So that was my dress my grandmother made me. I proceeded to walk inside and find a seat to sit down. And of course, I sat by myself. The kind of things that were going on outside continued to happen on the inside. And of course, I sat there until they finally called me to come up front and join the other students that would be a part of my class. And so that's sort of the way it went. You know, things were thrown at me, ice was thrown at me, a lot of pushing, shoving. You know, they had made signs, go back to Africa, using the N-word, we don't want you here, those kinds of things. But I just remembered what Dad said, held my head up high, and walked inside.
Wow. And as a teenager, how did you process all of that?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, you know, how I grew up, you know, the family I grew up in, not only my immediate family, but the family I grew up in within the community, because back then, you know, you were everybody's child. But not only that, you know, I have a strong faith, and I knew that I was there for a reason. And I knew that whatever they did to me couldn't be any worse than, you know, and my hope was that I would at least be able to start the process in terms of ensuring that we got the kind of education that we so deserve.
Wow. Wow. And speaking of education, because you went there to get an education, so describe your experience attending Harding High School. Talk to me, you know, talk to me about the education process. Did teaching and learning happen while all of that stuff was going on?
No, I was basically ignored while I was there by the teachers. Not only was I ignored by the teachers, but the principal at that school ignored a lot of things that were going on inside of the school those 4 days that I was there. He saw the things the kids were doing, the pushing in the hall, the kinds of things that were going on. He just turned around, walked back inside, and his office. I raised my hand when, you know, in class, it was like I wasn't even there. So basically, I was ignored by the teachers that were there. Right?
Wow. Wow. So
That's one of that's one of the reasons why after the last incident that happened at school, my father said, I'm sending you to school to get an education. If you're not going to get an education, then I'm not, and they're not going to guarantee your safety, then that's the reason why he made the decision to pull me out.
Wow, wow, wow. So I just wanted to see, did you see a comparison that the short time you were there, did you see a comparison? Were you able to get books to compare the books that you had in the all black school and the books you got at Harding? Did you see the difference? Did the school look better at Harding than it did at the school with all blacks? Were you able to notice a comparison there?
Well, I mean, yes, I did notice some comparison, Derek. I mean, yes, the books were new compared to what I had received in elementary school and middle school. Of course, classroom-wise, Harding is an older school. It was built back in the 1930s. So it, to me, comparison-wise, in terms of the physical part of the building, was not a lot different from the schools that I had attended thus far. But primarily, as I said, were the resources that were available that I was not getting, in the other in the segregated schools. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's interesting. And so overcoming all of that negative experience, I guess you were a woman of faith, and I guess you remembered the words that your father told you. Was there anything else that got you through from the start of the school to the end of the school? How did you overcome that negative experience without losing it,
Well, one of the things I always said is that, what at age 15, that experience that I had, they changed me in a lot of ways. A lot of people would think it would change you negatively because of what happened, the hatred, the calling me names and those things. But I decided at 15 that whatever I did in life, I was going to make sure that what happened to me did not happen to another child. So that's how I got into the field that I have been in for 40. I was in the field for 40 plus years. And to make sure, and I always felt that needed to start at a very young age. When you are 15 years old, you have been taught so many things. But if you start young, at a young age, to be taught acceptance of others and those types of things, by the time you're 15, our hope is that you would have those same kind of views about people who did not look like you. Yeah. It was hard for me to I knew I lived in a segregated world. But at the same time, it was hard for me to think about the fact that I wasn't accepted because because we were different. And that we're talking about the color of my skin. But I had said over and over again, in so many ways, we were the same. We were still teenagers. We liked the same things. We wanted to do the same things. But all that was because I did not look like them. And when I say that, meaning that the color of my skin was different from theirs, and our head was not accepted. Although I knew that that's what they had been taught, but I had been taught differently. And I had been taught differently, meaning that I was taught to accept people regardless of who they were. And that was the difference between the two of us.
Wow, wow, good stuff. As we celebrate Women's History Month, when you left the school and you went back home, did the community rally around you? Did the women in the community say, keep up the great work, we're on your side? Can you talk to me about the support that you got from the community when you left Harding High School?
Exactly, and I say that's why living in the kind of community district that I lived in, everybody everybody supported each other, regardless what family you came from, regardless what your parents did, regardless of the education of them. Everybody, it was a family, and that's the truth. Sometimes I think that's missing today. But of course, I ended up leaving Charlotte, and I went to Pennsylvania, and I lived with my aunt and uncle for the rest of the year. Had a very good experience, was in an integrated school there. And, but at the end of the year, I said to and it was a public school as well. But I said to my parents, I wanted to come home because I miss my family. I wanted to be with my family. This was my teenage years. So my parents brought me back to Charlotte, and they enrolled me in a private school in Asheville, North Carolina. It was a small all-girls school, and it was started by the Methodist Church. And so, of course, all the teachers there were women. And it was, as I said, a small school. And I ended up graduating from Allen. So I always felt that not only did I get the support when I left Charlotte and went to Pennsylvania, but also when I came back to Charlotte, and also when I went to Allen. So I've always received the support of women and others in this community, and encouraging me. And that was what helped me to be able to move on in life and get past all those things that have happened to me in the past.
Wow. So have you crossed paths with those people who treated you nasty when you were 15 years old? Talk to me about when you saw them, what went through your mind, and have you forgiven them, and have they apologized?
Well, yes. 50 years later, there was an article in the Charlotte Observer, and it was done by Tommy Tomlinson, and he was telling the story of starting out in 1957. And during that time, there was one young man who was at Harding at the time. And he was in his Sunday school class. His teacher was also a student at Harding. And he asked that morning, if you had the opportunity to ask someone to forgive you, who would it be? And he said, Dorothy Counts. And he asked him why. And he proceeded to tell them that he was there that morning when I came to Harding. He was in the crowd, but he said, I didn't do anything. But he said, I felt that I could have done more. I wish I had done more to protect her. And if I could ask for her forgiveness, I would. Well, what he did was he sent a letter to the Observer asking for my contact information. What they did was they sent it to me and asked me if they could give him my information. And I said, yes. He wrote me a letter by email and asked for forgiveness. And I said to Woody, I forgave you 50 years ago. You and I were brought up differently. It was not the right time, but that doesn't mean that working together, that you and I can ensure that what happened at Harding doesn't happen to your grandchildren and my grandchildren. So we became partners. We did several things together. We spoke at different schools. And then, at Freedom Park, there is a forgiving bench at Freedom Park. And he and I dedicated that bench together. I got and we ended up actually going out to dinner together. We communicated back and forth by email for a long time before we actually met face to face. And he said, "Where would you like to go?" And I said, "Let's go someplace you could go in 1957 that I could not go." And our decision was made. We went to the open kitchen on Moorhead Street, and that's where we had dinner. And of course,
Wow.
his wife was there, and another young man that was at Harding at the time who was in town visiting, he came. So Woody and I developed that relationship. So I say to people, this is how things happen in life, but it does not necessarily mean that things cannot become a full circle. He ended up with cancer. His wife contacted me and told me he was in hospice up in Huntersville. And so I contacted her, and asked if I could come and visit him. And I did. Went up, spent several hours with him. The nurse said, he can probably hear you, but he's not going to respond. And so I did. I talked to him. I talked about the things he and I had done together, the conversations that we had had over the years since then. And then, of course, when I left, I kissed him on the forehead and walked out of the room. The next morning, his wife, Judy, called me and she said, "Dot," he said, "he was waiting for you to come. He died 2 hours after you left."
Wow.
So that was, and of course, when he had his service, I went to his service with his family, and they considered me a part of their family. So
Wow.
that just shows you how things can happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it not come back into a full circle. So.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow. If anyone watching us, if you have a question, you can put the question in the chat and we'll get to your question. So tell me, how have you used that passion to help others? I guess you majored in psychology, education. Talk to me about how your life's journey has shaped you to be the woman that you are today.
Well, the first job that when I graduated from college, I moved to New York and accepted a position at a school, at a facility in New York for abused and neglected children. So that was my first job. And then I also taught in a preschool program in New York. And that's when I realized at that time that this is where my journey needed to start. So preschool education became my lifelong work, because as I said to you earlier, my feeling was that if I started at a very young age with children and teach them acceptance of others, that hopefully as they got older, they would have to go through what I went through. So then the other part of that is I've always felt that I needed to be an advocate for those who didn't have a voice. So my concentration has always been not only in the preschool arena with those children, but also their families as well. But when I retired in 2012, I decided I'm not going to come home, put a blanket over my knees, sit in a rocking chair and do nothing. I got involved with CMS in terms of working in schools that I consider was the system considered to be low performing schools. I live on the West Side. And of course, there are 2 elementary schools that I began with, and one of them being Bronze Academy, which is one of the lowest performing schools, not only in CMS, but also in the state. So along with my church and my community, we've adopted that school. We've gone in and do some work. We're continuing to work with them, and also University Park Arts Academy as well. People say, why don't you work with high school kids? I've gone into high schools, private schools as well as CMS schools. And I've done some things, but my focus has always been on those children that are K-5. And of course, you heard in my bio, I started the program at Garinger for those girls. There were 15 girls enrolled in that program in 10th grade. Those girls, we worked with them, all of them graduated from Garinger. Garinger is a diverse school culturally, but not racially. So we had 15 girls who came from all over the world as a part of that project. And 14 of them are now in college. One of them went in the military. Some of them got full scholarships to college. So, but not only that, not only do we work with them in that aspect, but we also want to expose them culturally and socially, because they lived in East Charlotte. A lot of them had never been downtown Charlotte before. We took them to Bloomington. We took them to Alvin Ailey when Alvin Ailey was here. We took them to law firms downtown. We took them to Bank of America so they could see that these are possibilities for them. And so that is the other kind of work that I have done also, Director.
Wow, good stuff. And as we celebrate Women's History Month, talk to me about the importance of pouring in to other young female students. What is the return on investment, and why do you do a concentration on women as we celebrate Women's History Month?
Well, I think one of the things is, I can't say we are forgotten, Dedrick, but a lot of times, in some ways we are. Things are changing. I mean, look what's happening now. It's a possibility. I'm not going to say possibility. We're going to have a new Black female on the Supreme Court. Okay. Look what she went through those hearings. But not only that, we have to learn to be supportive of each other and support each other. That's why I said my work has always been with Black females, okay? Because I want them to have the same thing that my dad said to me. You are inferior to no one. You can do whatever you want to do. What I try to do is to encourage them. I suggest anyone that's on here on this call tonight to be able to be supportive of each other. We all have interests, but those interests can develop into passions, and those passions can develop into so many other kinds of things. So I never felt that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I mean, I think in terms of the jobs that I've had, I started out in one role because of me. I had other people supporting me. I ended up in a vice president position at an agency that I worked for 20 years. So I say to them, you can do whatever you want to do. You just have to get in there and do it and show people exactly who you are.
Yeah. And since you brought up the nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, as a female, do you think that that the same thing would have happened to her if she was a male, the line of questioning that she had? So talk to me about what went through your mind from female to female about what she had to go through, and what does that say? And if you compare it, that's almost the treatment that you got when you went to Harding School. They didn't spit on her, but they did say things and do things. So talk to me about what happened to you, what happened to her, and why are we still here treating women like that? Talk to me about that.
Well, I have said, when people we talked talked about that with many. I said there were several reasons. First, she was a Black female, number one. She was a smart woman, smarter than some of those people that were interviewing her. I said, of course, the other part, it was political. And so today, we live in that world with politics where we are divided in so many ways. But the other thing about it is think in terms of men. A lot of white males don't respect Black women that are smart. And she's a smart woman. But at the same time, if you looked at her when she was going through all of that, no matter what they did to her, she held her head up high, and the words she used when she talked about what happened when she was walking across the yard at Harvard, and the woman said to her, persevere. And I think that's the piece that I thought about. I said, well, when I think about it, maybe that's what I was doing when I was at Harvard. I didn't think about that at the time. But I know that we have to go through those kinds of things. I mean, I look at, it's not just the Supreme Court, but look at other roles in this country where women are qualified, but they are not accepted because they are women. So we just have to keep pushing and making sure that they understand that we deserve to be at the same place that they are. This has been years and years and years, and it's going to still continue to be that way, Deborah. But that doesn't mean we don't stop doing it, because like I said, she is a very smart woman who knows the law and will do an excellent job. But regardless what she says, they want to make her look like she's back on the day of slavery. That's rather than accepting her for what she is today. Right.
Wow. President Biden recently signed the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill after 200 some years of trying to get it passed. Do you have any recollection of the Emmett Till incident as a young child? And if so, what was being said in Charlotte, or where you were? Because I guess that happened like in 55, 56. So do you have any recollection of that?
No, that was in 55. And you have to realize that I was like 12, 13 years old at that time. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember any conversations around that. We had conversations as I got older of things that had happened, to Blacks in this country. But excuse me. But no, that was not a conversation that I can remember that was had during that particular time. Right?
Gotcha. As we wrap this up, what advice would you give to the younger women who are looking to make a change and make an impact and make a difference? What would you tell the younger women as we celebrate National Women's History Month?
Well, what I say to them, all of them have an interest. Whatever your passion is, develop that passion and work toward it. The other thing I have said to all young people, we have to be advocates for ourselves, because if we don't do that, then nobody else will. And then the other thing is become involved in different kinds of things that are going on, so you can learn what's happening in this country, but also in the world. Don't sit back and not know. Like I tell people, I love to research. All I have to do is to see something come up and I say, oh, let me look into that and find out more about that. So you have to be knowledgeable of what's going on, but get involved. Like I have done, working with other young people to help bring them up to where you are. But at the same time, we all have interests, but take that interest and develop it into your passion and then move forward with that.
Wow. Wow. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. As we wrap up, and if anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat and we'll get to it. I just wanted to know, what is the feeling? Because as an African-American woman and you have history on your side, and when you go to these museums, like we've seen you in the African-American Museum in Washington, D.C., and Greensboro and things like that, when you see yourself and see that picture, and you being honored like that in the museums, tell me what goes through your mind.
People tell me I am too humble, but I tell people that, I appreciate that, but I didn't do that to get to that point. I did that because I knew that that was my calling. I knew that that was what I needed to do, and that's just a part of who I am. I appreciate being honored, but at the same time, it wasn't something that I did to get to that level. But at least I realized that people have respected me enough in terms of what I did. And my hope is they thought of it in terms of that I did make a difference. And that a part of my legacy is that I did make a difference in this world to be able to change our education system in America.
Yeah, we have a long way to go before we can change that education system. Yeah, we got a long way to go. So is there anything that you wish I would have asked or we would have discussed that we did not get to? Is there anything that you would like to add or wish we would have discussed that we didn't?
No, I can't think of anything right off. I always say anytime I do this, I like for it to be interactive, and I appreciate the questions and the questions that you ask. I think it's sort of covered most of my life in terms of what I'm doing. I am fortunate, and I have no problem telling it, that I just happened to celebrate 80 years of my life this past week. And that I tell people that just because I'm at that age doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna stop doing what I'm doing. I will continue to do and fight for our children, but make sure that they understand the importance of education, and also make sure that they understand that, they can be anything that they want to be in this world and continue working at it. So that is what I continue to try to do, and to uplift them in any way that I can and serve as a mentor to them any way that I can.
Wow. Well, you're doing a great job, and happy birthday. Happy birthday. Keep up the great work. And you have not, you're not tired yet. You keep on going. You keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you for taking time out to talk to us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Kenya.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dedrick, and thank you, Ms. Dorothy, as well, for sharing your story. I think it's remarkable to see how renowned you are right now and how appreciated you are, and the legacy that you have left behind and that you continue to embark on every day. And as a young woman, I speak on my behalf that I am truly inspired by you to walk on the track of education and to lead others and be a mentor. So to endure the adversity that you have and to be resilient and be able to then proclaim your resiliency as you do in such an humble way is beautiful. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time to present to us and talk to us as well. Dedrick, again, it's always a pleasure. You are an amazing person. You ask the most phenomenal questions and you get right down to the point. So I appreciate you as well. And again, to all of the attendees, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I hope that you all have a great evening. I'm going to leave it over to Ms. JC, and she's going to give you guys some information, and from there we'll depart. But again, thank you so much for everything tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorothy, and thank you, Dedrick. I just posted the form for Lyceum credit in the chat. Make sure that you're using your Wingate email or it will not allow you to have access to it.